Thank you all for joining me today. I have several folks on my panel that I'll introduce at some point during this presentation, but this orientation is for graduate assistants, so I hope you're in the right place. And here we go. I'm Angela Barlow, Dean of the Graduate School, and it is my pleasure to get to work with you today to present some really important information for our graduate assistants. So the goals that I have for this session there are three. One is I want to talk through like 6 really important facts that influence graduate assistants here on the campus at UCA. I'll also go over one key lesson, like what's one really big idea related to all of this. And then we'll have some time focusing on overall well-being for GAs. Some comments before we get started. As I go through these different facts and this key idea, I'll be sharing some scenarios, and all of these scenarios are real, although I've changed the names for sure, and sometimes I've tweaked the context a little bit, but these are all real scenarios that have occurred in the last couple of years related to GAs on our campus. And so each one is intended to set up thinking about some ideas or rules or policies and things of that nature that affect graduate assistants. So here's my first scenario that I just want you to think about for a second. And the scenario is that we have Jamal, who's a graduate administrative assistant or GAA. And like all graduate assistants, Jamal is paid twice a month. So we're paid on the 15th of the month and then on the last day of the month. And so in this scenario, Jamal on December 31st did not receive a paycheck. And so, Jamal's wondering what's up with that. Surely there must have been an error because he's really counting on that paycheck. So with that in mind, with that as a background, first question I have is, I want to get a feel for who's in the audience. And so on our campus, we have 4 different graduate assistant types: GTAs, research assistants, administrative assistants, and then that 4th one, residential, those are our housing GAs. So I'm going to launch a poll to see who's in the audience. And if you're not sure what type of GA you are, that's fine. You can just mark not sure. But let me launch this poll. And so you should see the poll now, and if you'll take a minute to respond. I'll give y'all are all responding very quickly, so thank you for that. I'll give you just a few more seconds. Okay, and so now I'll end the poll and I'll share the results just so that you all can see. Hopefully you can see right now. So most of us in the group are GTAs, so we are graduate teaching assistants. Teaching assistants, sometimes you're the instructor of record, sometimes you're actually helping another person teach, and that's fine. We have graduate research assistants. A lot of those are paid off grants, but some are paid through the university as well. Looks like we've got quite a few graduate administrative assistants. So those are ones that their responsibilities are primarily within an office of some nature. It looks like we have a couple of our housing GAs, the residential ones, and then we have a few that are not sure. Okay, so with that, let's keep that in mind as we go. Let me close this poll so I can see. Go away poll. There you go. All right. So here's why that matters. Okay, so there's really 2 reasons that it's important to know what type of GA you are. One is that the majority of your time, which the university defines that as 60%, should be spent on job responsibilities that align with your GA classification. So for example, if you are a GTA, so you're a teaching assistant, then the majority of your time should be spent doing things related to that teaching aspect. That's not to say that you couldn't be asked to, for example, answer the phone for the department, but you shouldn't be doing things like that like the majority of your time. So whatever your assignment is should be the majority of what you're doing. That's one reason to know your type. The second reason that this question matters is that our graduate administrative assistants, so those GAAs, do not receive a paycheck on December 31st. And that is actually my first fact. Remember, I said I was going to have 6 facts that are very important for graduate assistants. So that's the first one. So if you're a GAA, you need to know that you will not receive a paycheck on December 31st. And if you marked that you were not sure what type of GA you are, then you should find out what type of GA you are in case you are a GAA, and then you wouldn't be getting this paycheck. And if you're not sure, you can always contact the graduate school. Leslie George, who's one of our panel members, is here today, and she'll be the person. And towards the end of my part of this presentation, I'll share her email. But that's an easy question for us to try to answer. To give you some reality, like some numbers behind what that means. So in this table that I've created, I've assumed that you're somebody that has a salary of $8,600, which is the minimum salary for a full-time GA for fall and spring semester. So if you're a GTA, a GRA, or GAR, your paycheck will be separated out into pay periods, and there will be 18 pay periods. Whereas if you're a GAA, you're going to have one less pay period because you're not getting paid those last 2 weeks of December. I hope that makes sense. Basically, you're looking at a 9-month time period. There are 2 paychecks for each one of those months. That's where the 18 comes from. But the GAAs don't get that second December check, so that's why they have 17. So if you divide that overall salary by those pay periods, you'll see that although the GAAs have one fewer pay period, they actually get paid more per check. So that at the end of all this, they're getting the same salary, but it's just being paid out in different increments. So a couple of things. One, that overall salary that I have there is an example. That is the minimum amount, and different departments can pay more than that if they so choose. That's also the amount if you're a full graduate assistant, meaning you work 20 hours a week. So your particular paychecks may not be that actual amount. This is just an example. And if you're a GAA and you'd like to know more about why you don't receive a paycheck at the end of December, I'm happy to talk to you about that outside of this webinar, but I'll say it has to do with the Fair Labor Standards Act, and it has to do with the minimum wage in Arkansas, okay? All right, so if we go back to our scenario with Jamal. So Jamal did not get that paycheck on December 31st, and he was surprised. And so he called his program coordinator, who then called the graduate school to find out, like, hey, why didn't Jamal get paid? And there's the reason, is that he was a graduate administrative assistant. And I guarantee you that if Jamal had gone to orientation, like you all are doing today, and had written down that first fact because it related to his work, he would have been prepared and budgeted accordingly. But for whatever reason, that information did not make it to Jamal. And so then now he's in a financial burden, okay? That was my first scenario. Here's my second scenario. So I have Jennifer, and she's a graduate assistant. She's ready to start the fall semester. She went ahead and took classes in the summer, and you can see she made A's in classes except for one, and she received an incomplete. But she's like, no worries. I'll just be able to go right into my program and everything will be great. And so the question is, should Jennifer be worried? Like, is that incomplete going to mess her up in terms of her graduate assistantship? So with that in mind, I do want to talk about like the qualifications for being appointed as a graduate assistant or reappointed if you're continuing. Of course, one requirement is that you have a GPA of a 3.0 or higher. And that's actually true of all graduate students. So in order to stay in good standing in graduate school, you have to have a 3.0. I put the asterisk there because if you're a GA and you fall below a 3.0, and that's for either like the semester or for the overall, then you will be placed on probation. And a GA can be on probation for only one semester. And then if you remain on probation after that, then you will not be in good standing, and therefore you'll be released from your assistantship. Now that's a change in the rules that we made 2 years ago. So if you've got a buddy who 5 years ago lost his assistantship because he had gone on probation, and he's trying to tell you about that, then say, look, dude, the rules have changed. And so basically, if you're a graduate assistant, you get put on probation, you get one semester to work your way off of probation. And that is fact number 2, okay? So again, that's a fairly new rule. We put that in place 2 years ago. But the idea is that, if you're in your assistantship this fall and you mess up, you've got one class that you get messed up on, we don't want you to lose your assistantship as a result of that. So we give you that one additional semester to get your grades back up and going. We don't give you 2 semesters because then at that point you're not making academic progress. And we want you to make academic progress. And the assumption is that maybe the assistantship standing in your way. Okay, so back to qualifications for reappointment. Second one, no incomplete grades. Now, this particular requirement is not true anymore. So we changed that this past year, like in the middle of the academic year. So whereas somebody a year or so ago might have gotten a letter that said, hey, you've gotten an incomplete, therefore you're not eligible to continue on your assistantship, that is no longer the case. And so I have struck through that one here. Incomplete grades are supposed to be resolved within a semester of when you receive them. So our assumption is that that will be cleared and that your grades will be good and you'll continue making progress towards your degree. So that one I'm just going to take off my list. Other requirements, good report from your academic advisor. So we always have evaluations for our GAs to make sure that everything's going well. So you want to make sure that your academic advisor's providing us with that report. There are some time limits, like typically for a master's student, you're not supposed to have an assistantship for over 2 years, or for doc students 4 years, but there's always a case to be made that maybe you need an additional semester. And so those are conversations that we're willing to have. And then, and I've said this a couple of times already, in order to continue as a graduate assistant, you need to be making satisfactory progress towards your degree, which means maintaining that 3.0, taking the right number of classes every semester, and so forth. So when we look back at Jennifer's scenario, she had made A's, which was great, but then she had that incomplete. If this was 1 year ago, we would have been like, Jennifer, sorry, you're no longer eligible for your assistantship. But now that rule has changed, and so Jennifer's good. As long as she gets into the semester and does the work and clears that incomplete, then she will progress right on and nothing will be affected regarding her assistantship. And I probably didn't say this at the beginning, so I'll say it now. If you have questions, you can put those in the chat. And then at some point, I'll pause, like at the end, we'll come back and answer questions that y'all have, but you can go ahead and put those in the chat. So here's my next scenario. This is Sunny. And remember, all these scenarios are real. They have just different names and sometimes a little bit different context. So here's Sunny. He's from California, and he receives an out-of-state fee waiver thanks to his graduate assistantship. So for this fall, he decided he wanted to change his assistantship from a full 20-hour-a-week assistantship to just a half assistantship for 10 hours a week because he knew he had a really tough course load ahead. So like he talked to his department chair, his program coordinator, and they made that change. And so the question is, does changing from that full assistantship to a half assistantship mess anything up for him? So in terms of graduate assistants, y'all don't get very many benefits. And I put benefits in air quotes because technically a graduate assistant is not a benefited position with the university. So we don't have actual benefits when you think of like insurance and leave and that kind of thing. But there are some perks to it, is probably a better word. One of those is the out-of-state fee waiver. So if you're an out-of-state student and you're on a full-time graduate assistantship, so that's 20 hours a week, then you receive an out-of-state fee waiver. And that is my fact number 3. So, and notice that it's full-time. So full-time GAs receive the out-of-state fee waiver. So when we look at Sunny's scenario here, did this mess him up? Well, yeah, it sort of does, because now that he's no longer 20 hours a week, full assistantship, he no longer qualifies for that out-of-state fee waiver. So now he'll have to pay the out-of-state tuition fees. If he's prepared to do that, that's fine. But when this actually happened, that student was like, what happened? And that's what happened. Okay, so just keep in mind that if you're counting on that out-of-state fee waiver that comes from being a graduate assistant, then you have to make sure that you're staying at that full assistantship load. My next scenario. So this is Ray, and Ray receives tuition remission with her assistantship. And each semester, her assistantship will pay up to $5,000 in tuition. So Ray's fall tuition bill is $3,500. And she's planning to use the remaining $1,500 for books and rent. So the question is, will Ray be able to do that? So when we talk about GA benefits, and again, the benefits is in quotation marks, it's really perks, I guess. One is the out-of-state fee waiver. Another is tuition remission. But here's some things about this tuition remission. Only about 20% of our GAs receive tuition remission. So if you're sitting there wondering, do I get tuition remission? Then chances are you don't. But you're always welcome to contact Leslie. And again, I'll give you her contact information later if you're not sure. Or maybe you receive partial tuition remission and she can answer that question as well. But again, only about 20% of our GAs receive tuition remission. For those that do, that money is only used for tuition and course-related fees, and that's it. So it's not like a scholarship. Like a lot of us when we were undergraduates, perhaps we had a scholarship that paid our tuition, and then if there were extra money, it came back to us. Or maybe you're thinking about financial aid. Like if you're on financial aid and you've got a set amount, it covers that tuition, and then whatever the difference is comes back to you. That is not true for tuition remission as a graduate assistant. So it will pay that extra money, but you're not going to get anything back from it that wasn't paid towards tuition. And said differently, that amount, that tuition remission amount, will not exceed the actual cost of tuition and fees. And that, my friends, is fact number 4. Again, this probably doesn't apply, well, I know it doesn't apply to all of you. It applies to a small group of you. But the key idea is that if you're receiving tuition remission as a part of your assistantship, it's only going to be the actual cost of tuition and fees. So when we look at Ray in this situation, she's planning to use that $1,500 for books and rent, but it's not coming back to her. They're going to apply and pay the $3,500 on her tuition bill, and that's it. So that $1,500 remains with the department. GA benefits. Apparently I thought of some more. Okay, so let's see what's next. Number 3, the hyper access. And I put summer in here. So this is like hot off the press new. And like Leslie is in here and she may not even know this. Like this is so hot off the press news. So one thing that a lot of GAs don't know is that if you're on, of course you have access to the hyper, right? That's our physical activities building, right? So you go and you work out or you do dance classes or whatever. So as a student in the fall and the spring, you have access to the hyper. You pay that fee unless you're an online student. I'll come back to that in a second. But if you're on campus and you're paying your fees, you've paid a fee to access the hyper. What happens is in the summer, if you're a graduate assistant in the summer, then you pay the fee, but it only counts when you're actually in class. So we've had instances where a graduate assistant was working from May through August, but only took a class in July, so they could not access the hyper in May and June and August. So we have worked with the folks over the hyper, and that will no longer be the case. So, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of the student, but we had a student who brought this to our attention this summer. And while we were not able to fix this issue for him in this summer, it will be fixed for summers moving forward. So graduate assistants will have access to the hyper regardless of when their classes are offered and that kind of thing. If you're an online student, but you're here on your assistantship, and sometimes that happens, as an online student, you have not paid the fee, so you don't have access to the hyper. If you find yourself in that situation and you want hyper access, then contact the graduate school and we'll see how we can get that arranged. Basically, what I'm trying to argue is that as a graduate assistant, regardless of whether you're paying that fee, you should have access to the hyper. And what's going to happen is the graduate school is ending up paying that extra little bit of fee to allow people full access. So that's a benefit. And that's fact number 5. So as a graduate assistant, if you're a graduate on an assistantship in the summer, right? If you're not on an assistantship in the summer, then this doesn't apply to you. But if you are, I guarantee you have access to hyper. This is being recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel. If anybody argues with you, then say, go to that video. We should be at about the 20-minute mark. They can hear this and hear me saying, you have access to the hyper. The graduate school will make sure the fee is covered. Okay? All right, and then my fourth GA benefit is quality practical work experience. One of the things that I want to make sure all of you hear is that the work that you're doing as a graduate assistant should help you to grow in your field, whether your field is biology or music or film or whatever it is. The work that you're doing should be something that relates to your discipline that you're studying. If it's not, if you get into this and you're like, they have me doing this. This isn't what I thought I'd be doing. It's not helping me grow. I need you to let us know. I don't know if there's anything we can do at that moment with that assistantship, but it can definitely inform our future long range planning plans around assistantships. This shouldn't be a problem. Like most of y'all, like 99% of y'all are going to be doing things that are related to your assistantship, and that's important. But if you find yourself in a weird situation, you're like, this is not anything like I'm in film and I'm never even doing film stuff, then, have a conversation with us so that we can see what's going on. In return, there are some responsibilities. Steady progress to a degree has already been mentioned. You are expected to be enrolled in courses during your appointment. So if you're appointed for fall and spring, and then you get the summer appointment somehow, then you're also supposed to register in the summer. If you're on a full assistantship, then you have to register for 9 hours. If you are part-time, then you don't have to do 9 hours, but you do have to register for some classes. If it's your last semester, we can talk about those 9 hours. If you only need 3 hours, that's fine. There's an expectation that you make up missed work, right? So if you miss some time, talk it over with your supervisor, make arrangements to make that work up, that's fine. You are expected to maintain standards of academic honesty, integrity. Any violations of academic integrity come through the graduate school, and so I would say that would put your assistantship in jeopardy. So you make sure that you are upholding high standards there. And then you should receive information from HR at some point about some online modules, around just specific types of training that as a GA, you're supposed to do those. So be on the lookout for that information. And as soon as you get it, go ahead and complete those modules. I think I've got 2 more scenarios, so we're almost there. This scenario is Sydney, and Sydney's on a full assistantship, 20 hours a week. And then another department on campus wants her to teach a class for them this semester. And Sydney is super excited because she's excited about getting to teach and make more money. So the question is this additional work on campus okay? So this is referred to as concurrent employment, right? So you have a job on campus already. It's considered all that a graduate student's supposed to do, 20 hours. That's a full assistantship. And then somebody else on campus wants to employ you in addition to that. So that's called concurrent employment. And so the policy is that GAs on a full-time assistantship may not engage in concurrent employment on campus without the consent of the department or program and the graduate dean. That's me. And that's fact number 6. So in general, concurrent employment not allowed. Some things to note about that. Number 1, a lot of times this happens because that people are on a graduate assistantship and then somebody says, oh, we'd like to pay you as a student worker to do these hours, these extra things. And we cannot do that. Like our system is not set up for that. GAs are salaried, student workers are paid hourly. It's a completely different pay schedule. And so that's not happening at all. So if somebody said, I want to do the student worker, like I have to just say, no, we can't do that. Sorry. Sometimes people will say, okay, well, it's not a student worker. It would actually be like extra compensation for a graduate assistant. So I'll consider that. I'll look and consider approving it if some conditions are met. And these are those conditions. Number 1, the additional work has to be for a fixed period of time. So it has to have a start date and an end date. And it has to involve no more than 5 additional hours per week. And again, I can provide the reason behind all of these things, but outside of this webinar. But that's the first thing I asked for. Start date, end date, how many hours per week. Another thing is that the time period should not exceed a month. And again, this is about just looking at how much time are we devoting. If we've got something that's a whole semester long, well, we should be hiring somebody else to do it. So I look at the time period and it should not exceed 1 month. And then the last thing is that the additional work should provide a meaningful experience related to the GA's discipline. In other words, it is helping you to grow as a professional, and it's connected to your discipline in some way. So, if you're in film, but then they've got a graduate assistantship work that's like 5 hours a week, where you're over here, I don't know, watering plants or something, that's not helping you to grow in your film discipline. And so that would not be approved. So when we look in Sydney's case, there's a definite start and end date, but it's for the full semester. And so this is a request for concurrent employment that would not be approved when it came through the approval system. And then that department would just have to find someone else to teach the class. All right, last scenario. Here's Sumit. And Sumit receives a tuition scholarship with his assistantship, and the department told him they'd promised him $2,500 each semester. So $2,500 for fall and spring. And he knew that wouldn't cover all of his tuition, but it would cover most of it. So when Sumit looked at his fall tuition bill, his scholarship was more than the $2,500, and it actually covered all the tuition. He was super excited and so thankful. But should Sumit be worried? Y'all see why maybe he should be worried? Like, it was supposed to be $2,500, but now it's way more than that. So this is actually my one key lesson, and that is, if it does not look right, always ask the graduate school. So that Sumit, which again, that's a pseudonym, that person that happened to, they didn't question it. They were just so thankful that their tuition was fully covered for fall semester. They just smiled and rolled along. And I don't think they were trying to be evil in any way. They were just really, really grateful. But then what happened was the next semester, when they were supposed to get that $2,500 for the spring, they didn't get it because this department had used up all their money. And so now they have nothing covering their spring semester. So, I mean, we worked with that student to get to a better resolution than just saying too bad, so sad. But the key idea here is that if it does not look right, ask the graduate school, because you'd rather know now that you were overpaid and like have to pay something back or whatever, or plan for the future around that, than get to the end and go, oh my gosh, and you're out of luck. Okay. So I've mentioned a couple of times that you can always contact the graduate school. When it comes to graduate assistant stuff, Leslie George, and Leslie's on the panel today, so you see her smiling very politely and now waving at us. Leslie is your person to contact, and her email is there on the screen. You're also welcome to email me with any questions or concerns that you have, and there's my email as well. And then just to say a couple of things before I turn this over to John Scott. First of all, if you haven't already, please follow us, the UCA Grad School. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and X. See, I'm cool and hip. I know that Twitter changed its name. So we're on X, and we would appreciate you following us. We currently have about 1,700 followers, and we're trying to get to 1,919 because that was our record enrollment last fall. Although we're set to break that this fall. I'd also like to encourage you to find our podcast. So our podcast is Grad Chats with Dr. B. We try to release one season each semester. There's some really great interviews on there. We interview students as well as faculty on topics that are directly related to graduate students. We have a listener in Germany, so that means we are an internationally listened to podcast. So we always brag about that. But if you take a moment to listen to one podcast, you'll probably figure out, oh, okay, this is good information for me as a graduate student, and I hope you'll listen to them all. And as soon as we have more information about this season's releases, we'll be pushing that out to all of our graduate students. We actually have 2 graduate support GAs now. So John Scott has been with us for a couple of years. He's continuing, and he will be talking to you next about our topics around well-being. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And John Scott, you're going to introduce our other support GA, aren't you?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. So when John Scott gets talking, he'll introduce you to our second graduate support GA as well. Before I turn it over to him, though, I do want to point out, if you haven't noticed, if you haven't seen this anywhere, this is our graduate school tagline: inspired, empowered, accomplished. I hope that I feel like you were inspired at one point to go to graduate school. I hope that while you're here in graduate school, you will become empowered so that when you finish, you are accomplished and ready to go out and do great things as a professional. But I also hope that during each day, you find moments where you're inspired, empowered, and accomplished. And I hope that as we have opportunities to talk moving forward, that we will talk about those ideas, because those are the three words that we're really trying to ground your graduate assistant experience in: being inspired, empowered, and accomplished. So with that, John Scott, I'm turning it over to you. So I'm going to stop. Well, I guess it stopped sharing my screen. And so now you may do so.
Okay. So it's not letting me share, Dr. Barlow.
No.
Let me see. Okay. It's asking me to quit and log back in. So this is going to totally derail the YouTube video.
Okay.
But it should work.
Okay. Well, while you do that, I'll answer some of these questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So our first question is around teacher of record. Is there a way that they get paid more for a class in the spring when they are the sole instructor for it? Nope. Your graduate assistant pay is your graduate assistant pay, and it doesn't matter whether you are the instructor of record or whether you're assisting in a class. I would hope that you would have a conversation with the program coordinator or the department chair, though. For example, if you're assisting with 2 classes in the fall semester, that might be equivalent to teaching 1 class in the spring semester. So I hope that your workload would be adjusted, but your pay scale would not change. Good question. Here's another one. What is the hyper? I don't know what hyper stands for, but that's, like they've got weights and workout equipment and the basketball court, swimming. And so all those places that we want you to go and be physically active so that you can, take care of yourself all the way around. Let's see. Oh. Let's see. I'm going to pause on answering questions and let John Scott go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Excellent.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So apologize for the difficulties. Appreciate everyone for being here. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background of this position. I'm also going to introduce the new person that's going to be helping me this year and then taking over later on. And I'm going to talk about some of the initiatives that we've been trying to undertake in the graduate school to really prioritize graduate student well-being and mental health, and then dive into a particular topic related to stress, which is appropriate given this webinar with grad assistantships, which can be quite stressful. And then I want to end it by providing some contact information. I'm going to also once again plug Dr. Barlow's podcast, because there are lots of great resources on there. So my name is John Scott Kelly, and I'm in my 4th year in the counseling psychology program, which is really hard to believe. This position actually started during my 1st year, so that was 2020. That was the height of COVID. Like, everyone was extremely stressed, and since then it has really blossomed. This is something that I've been doing talks in different departments. I've been doing mindfulness sessions. I've been doing all kinds of things on campus. And really the main goal has been, again, to try to boost graduate student well-being and mental health. It's oftentimes campuses will prioritize mental health, but it tends to be geared towards undergraduates. And you'll see that more in a moment. But we've really been trying to bring that to the graduate school. And I'm really excited to introduce Megan DiBenedetto, who is in her 1st year in the counseling psychology program. And she's going to be helping me out this year. We're going to be collaborating. Oh, yes. Hey, Megan. We're going to be collaborating to continue this mission. And I'll get into some of the more specifics about the mission later on, but I'm really excited to have Megan in the counseling psychology program for one, and also as a partner in this position. So I'm going to start with some polls. The first poll: what percentage of graduate students reported experiencing stress-related problems that interfered with their academic performance and well-being? 2 to 12%, 13 to 23%, 24 to 34%, 35 to 45%. To go with your gut, whatever seems right.
So answers are coming in. I'll give folks just a few more seconds, about 5 more seconds. And I'll end the poll and share the results.
Okay. Yes. So not too many at the low end, and most of the responses are there, the 24 to 30 to 45%, and it is 35 to 45%. So, and the key word there is interfered. So it's not just, yeah, graduate school stressful, GAs can be stressful, but it's actually interfering with like the main things that we're here to do, which is trying to boost our professional competence, trying to gain new skills, learn things along the way. But the stress is actually getting interfering with that process. So that 35 to 45% number is pretty substantial. And I have another poll. Self-reports of anxiety and depression are blank among graduate students compared to the general population. 3 times lower, equally as high, 3 times higher, 6 times higher.
Our votes are coming in. I'll give folks a few more seconds. And I'll end the poll and share the results.
Okay, majority of the answers 3 times higher, but it actually is 6 times higher, which is really hard to believe. I mean, that's a significant difference. It's a huge difference. And so compared to the general population, graduate students are reporting a lot of anxiety and depression. So taken together, there's this preponderance of stress, there's a lot of anxiety and depression. And so again, that kind of speaks to what we're trying to do here in the graduate school, trying to address some of these things. So my last poll question is, what percentage of graduate institutions reported having a campus-wide plan, vision, or mission statement that specifically references the mental health and well-being of graduate students? 24%, 44%, 64%, 84%.
So folks are voting. I'll give people a few more seconds. And I'll end the poll and share the results.
24% majority. Okay, I think my tone didn't give it away, but yes, it is actually 24%. So I'm gonna go back. So yeah, and despite all the stuff that I was talking about before, the high rate of stress, anxiety, and depression, only 24% of graduate institutions are mentioning this in a plan or a vision mission statement that's directly related to the experience of their graduate students. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of times there are things in place, mission statements, those kinds of things that are geared towards just the general college population, but it doesn't necessarily mention graduate students in particular. So with that in mind, we wanted to change that. We wanted to be different here at UCA. So we came out with our graduate school mental health mission statement. And it is, the UCA Graduate School strives to create an academic community that values mental health in a manner that facilitates the success of graduate students. And that's the main reason why I'm here today. A big reason why I'm here today is to try to uphold that mission and provide some information about some sources of stress, and so to know more about it, to be able to identify it when it occurs, but also some strategies to help with it. So I hope I'm able to do that today. And all this goes in the theme of work-life balance, which is important considering, again, why we're here today, talking about grad assistantships, which can ask a lot of you. You already have classwork going on, you have papers and exams and things, but then you also have these work responsibilities, and it can be difficult to balance that. And when the difficulties occur in that work-life balance, it can lead to this experience called burnout. And you may be familiar with it. It's certainly gotten more, there's more understanding about it in the public consciousness now lately, it seems like, to me anyway. But more than just feeling tired on a given day or feeling a little detached on a given day, burnout really has to do with this chronic stress. So you have stress occurring over an extended period of time that builds and builds and builds until there's this long-lasting feeling of exhaustion, whether it be physical, emotional, or both, as well as this sense of detachment. And so I've got a lot of different factors here, a lot of things that are associated with it. I'm going to touch on a few big ones. So one big one that I think the one that people think of the most is the physical and emotional exhaustion part of it, where you're simply tired and maybe there's more emotions coming up, maybe like anger, maybe feeling more sad. Um, but then there are also other things like a diminished immunity, getting sick more often, things like that. But then there are other ones that are maybe not are as well or are less well known. One is self-inefficacy. So the sense that we're not producing good work. There's a sense that it's not going to get better, not feeling particularly productive or motivated. And that can be really difficult too, especially when there are a lot of expectations from various sources on being productive and being effective. The next two are kind of related. They both have to do with that, with a sense of detachment. But with the first one, cynicism, it's more like detachment from the actual tasks, so what you're doing. This a sense of apathy, not really enjoying it, not feeling like it's an important work that's being done. And then the last one is depersonalization, which is more of an attachment from the people that you're surrounded with. So it could be people within around your GA position or people within your program or both, depending on the level of burnout that's present. And these different factors can emerge at different points of the burnout experience. For some, maybe it's the physical and emotional exhaustion comes first. Then, if it persists, maybe the depersonalization comes last. But it can also come the other way too, where depersonalization can be the first thing that happens. And so, the main goal of this is to help everyone identify when it may be occurring, to know that this might be something that is cause for concern. That's something that can be addressed with some of these behavioral strategies I'll talk about in here in a second. And the main point of each of these is that they tend to be stress relieving or energy replenishing activities. So I'm going to go through several here. There's a lot of information on this slide, but again, since it's on YouTube, it can be a resource to go back to. So I went ahead and left all of this information on there. The first thing I want to talk about is self-care, which also has gotten more popular lately. And again, these need to be activities that are stress relieving and energy replenishing. But some of these tend to be fulfilling relationships, proper diet, good sleep hygiene, which is I want to sit here for a second and talk about sleep hygiene, how important that is to be consistent with sleep, to maintain the same patterns on the weekends as during the week, which I know sounds terrible, but it really is helpful. And it has so many important implications for other areas of functioning. So I really want to highlight sleep hygiene. It's also not using cell phone like an hour or 90 minutes before bed, maybe blue light blocker glasses, those types of things. But other ones could be time in nature, leisure time. It can be difficult for students to allow themselves to have leisure time. I've certainly been in that position before, but it's really important too. The next one is self-compassion, and this also has different factors. The one that people probably think of the most when it comes to self-compassion is the self-kindness aspect, being kind to yourself. It really is it's that straightforward on that one. But there are more aspects to it as well. One is common humanity, that there's a sense that this experience is not unlike those of other people, have that sense of connection there with broader humanity. And then aspects of mindfulness, which include non-judgment, trying to experience the moment, but not necessarily attach some sort of judgment or conclusion to it. And also acceptance, seeing things and accepting them for what they are. So I mentioned relationships in the self-care section, and I want to go a little deeper into that one. And these relationships need to be those that promote feelings of belonging, gratitude, and stability. Those can be related to the people in your cohort, people related to your GA position, family and friends that it's easy to lose touch with as throughout the semester, throughout various GA duties. Those are incredibly important. It's actually one of the most potent predictors of graduate student well-being. So again, I can't emphasize enough that it's really important to maintain those as best you can. But one of those relationships is also that with your advisor. So these are really important as well. They can build that sense of professional belonging. This is someone who's established in the field, who is a professional, who really is there to help you get to the same position or even exceed that position. And it can be very difficult to to know where the line is, or like what's too much, what's not enough. There are a lot of expectations there, but it's important to be able to form boundaries to regulate stress in these scenarios as well. And when it comes to establishing boundaries, it's very difficult. It's very situation dependent, but a few things that I think are helpful for determining where that line is for the boundary can be to ask yourself if this activity is going to generate constructive stress or destructive stress. So on the constructive stress part up front, that would be activities that are challenging, definitely evoking some stress, but there's a sense that they are growth promoting, that they're going to be on the whole positive. Now, on the other hand, there's the destructive stress, which actually it's almost like unnecessary stress. It's taking away from growth. It's interfering with the growth process. And if you're having difficulties figuring out what that line is, you're not sure if it's constructive or destructive, it can be helpful to ask for help. So this can be talking with your colleagues, be talking with the advisor themselves, or someone else just someone to talk to and talk things through, try to figure out where that line is. Another big aspect of stress, though, is financial stress. And Dr. Barlow talked earlier about different pay schedules based on different positions and how that can affect things. And in a similar vein, I want to talk about how budgeting can be helpful for reducing anxiety related to uncertainty. So oftentimes, for many people, a sense of uncertainty, the unknown, can be very anxiety provoking. It's unclear in those situations what direction is best, which direction you need to go in. This can even happen when there are two good options and you just don't know which one to choose from. And budgeting can help kind of strip that away, to know where you stand, to know how much is coming in, how much is going out. And there are a few apps that are really helpful for this. Mint and Pocket Guard in particular have great reviews online. I've used Mint in particular, but it's helpful for keeping everything out in the open, knowing where you stand, and try to bring down that stress. Because if stress can be brought down in any area, that can help reduce stress overall, which then can promote optimal functioning in other areas. And I want to end here just by giving some contact information. I realize, Dr. Barlow, that I guess you've reminded me again that I'm not hip and cool. I still have Twitter listed, but it is X now. So on X, you can find the grad support handle at UCA grad support. You can also email us directly at gradsupport@uca.edu. And one thing I want to mention is that we can also meet through video chat on Google Meet, and we can talk through different experiences related to stress. And I'm here to help with that, and so is Megan. So if you ever want to do that, you can contact us through the email, and we can work in some type of meeting. I do want to stress that these aren't therapy sessions. I'm a therapist, but they're not therapy sessions. It's more like talk through and try to develop strategies that can be used to help reduce general stress levels and really within the graduate school perspective. And lastly, I do want to plug again Dr. Barlow's podcast. I think it's fantastic. We have covered so many different topics on the podcast over this is the fourth year for the podcast as well. We talked about burnout, for example. We'd also talked about the imposter phenomenon, and that was with graduate students. And I think there were 4 graduate students who all talked about their experiences with the imposter phenomenon. And that can be a great way to kind of get a sense of how other people are feeling, because the imposter phenomenon always feels like such a unique experience, but then a lot of other people experience it as well. There's a podcast on networking, gratitude, which we were really proud about the name. It's a gratitude podcast for graduate students, and also nutrition, various deans, and many other topics. So I encourage all of you to go check out the podcast. Wherever you find your podcasts, you can find Grad Chats with Dr. B. And that's it. So I'll get back to you, Dr. Barlow.
All right. Thanks, John Scott. Well, that ended just in time. We've got like 10 minutes, so I'll go through some of our questions and see if I can answer these. Let's see. So another question that we had, is it possible to be required to work for a certain amount of hours other than 10 or 20? So we do have a few, Leslie, not up and down if I'm correct, that like we occasionally get a 15-hour. And there are some that are less than 10, they end up having to be approved. But whatever you're hired for has been set. And so if you're not clear, that's a question that you can email Leslie and she can tell you exactly what your number of hours are. Here's a question. Are taxes factored into our salary already, or will we need to pay those later? So when you are paid, you will have completed your tax documents as a part of the hiring process, and so they will withhold tax from your paycheck. So your paycheck will not be that full amount. There will be some tax taken out of that. Let's see, one of my colleagues in the same position as me got paid today, but I did not. Do I reach out and figure out what might be wrong, paperwork, etc.? So that is a question for Leslie George. Leslie, give him a wave. There's Leslie. So Leslie can tell you probably what happened is that person's start date was August 1st and yours might have been August 16th, but we certainly need to check into that. So Leslie is your person to reach out and talk to about that. Next question, does your GA pay automatically cover tuition, or would you have to go back in after being paid and manually pay tuition? So if you are a graduate assistant and you are not receiving tuition remission, okay, so you are not supposed to get your tuition paid for, somehow you're having to pay for it. It is two separate things. So you will be paid, you get your paycheck that's processed through HR, etc. But then your bill is sitting there and that's handled through student accounts. And so it is not the case that your pay is automatically applied to your tuition. You have to take care of paying that bill. Next question, can a GA continue to work after graduation in May for one more summer term if the department has the resources available? You cannot continue as a graduate assistant, right? So in order to be a graduate assistant, you have to be enrolled in courses. And if you've graduated, then, you know, that's not a possibility. A department could hire you as extra help if they have money in their extra help line, but that would be a conversation and talk with that department about. Next question. Hi, when will tuition remission be applied for this fall semester if it is one of our benefits? Leslie, do you have an idea of when tuition gets applied to the bill?
It should show up in your MyUCA. I think it doesn't disperse, whatever that means, until September 1st. However, it depends on where you are in your hiring process. We don't even send any information to student accounts about your scholarship until you are fully hired. So I would recommend reaching out to me and I can tell you all of that if an amount has been applied and maybe help you go in to see where you can see it.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I will say that we have had instances where a person knew their tuition was going to be paid, and so they just never looked at their bill. And so then, you know, like a month goes by and they start getting emails that are like, you know, if you don't pay, you were going to drop you for non-payment. And they would ignore those because they knew their tuition was supposed to be paid. But then they got dropped for non-payment and now they're not in classes anymore. And that would be the first time they'd come talk to us. So like, remember that key point was like, if it doesn't look right, contact the graduate school. That's a case, you know, so like if we're into September and your tuition, which was supposed to have been covered, has not been covered, like reach out to us. If you're getting messages that say we're going to drop you for non-payment, those things don't just automatically go away. Reach out to us so that we can figure out where the breakdown in the system was so that we can then take care of that. Okay. Good question. Got about 4 more questions. Let's see. Are athletic GAs paid less than education GAs? All graduate assistants are supposed to be paid like that full assistantship, that minimum, that amount that I told y'all, which was $8,600 for a full assistantship for fall and spring. All graduate assistantships are supposed to be paid that minimum amount, regardless of whether you're paid through the graduate school or athletics or housing or what have you. So I would say that athletic GAs are not paid less than education GAs, that everybody meets that expected minimum amount. And that's something that Leslie checks, went through all hiring paperwork when they come through to make sure that's the case. Next question is it possible to work on campus part-time job during break if I'm no GA in that time? So I would say we need to like look at your GA contract, because most of y'all as GAs, like if you're hired for the academic year, you're salaried and your position starts like August something and it goes through May 15th. So even though you may not be working for your graduate assistantship over the break, let's say the winter break, you're still considered working because you're being paid, you're salaried. So we'd have to take a really close look at your hiring paperwork to see if there is a break in employment. And if there's a break in between, like, start and end dates, then that's a possibility. But otherwise, I would say no. But that's a question that Leslie can help you to answer. So this one says, not a question, but for people who struggle with routine like I do, the Fabulous app. So this is the name of an app, Fabulous. I love that name. The Fabulous app has been really helpful for keeping a routine during the school year, including like drinking water or brushing teeth, etc., every day. So if you hear John Scott talking about work-life balance and how easy it is to become overwhelmed and stressed. So here's a recommendation for a Fabulous app that might help with that. Oh, wow, I've still got questions. Okay, I'm gonna try to answer a few more and I'll hang on for a few minutes. For John Scott, are counseling services therapy available on campus for graduate students? The answer is yes. They're limited to like 10 sessions. Is that right, John Scott?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, you can contact the counseling center, or you can contact John Scott and ask that question and he'll get you the answer for sure. But you do have access to those services, but it is limited in terms of the number of times. And so, John Scott, will you find that answer out and let us know? Okay. Another question, is the pay different if it considered a stipend with tuition remission rather than GA pay? It should not be. If you had somebody who said, look, we're going to pay you $5,000 plus tuition instead of the $8,600, that's not allowed. So the pay has to be one thing. It has to meet that minimum. If they're doing tuition, that's a separate thing. And so those are two different pockets of money. I hope I interpreted that question correctly. I have two more questions. When are we expected to receive our hiring paperwork, tax forms? Are we supposed to receive those before our start date? Leslie, they are supposed to do all of that before they start, right?
Yes, that's a part of your onboarding. And so again, it kind of depends on where you are in the process, and I can see that. So if you are concerned that you haven't received that, get with me and we can figure out exactly what's going on.
Okay. This last one is a very specific instance of an athletic GA who's being paid. Oh, wait, I got another one. So I'm not going to answer that one in this whole group. I'm going to say, please reach out to Leslie about that one. So that was started out as an athletic GA. So reach out to Leslie. And then last one, not a question, but went to therapy at UCA every 2 weeks throughout the semester. We are given 10, but if needed more, my therapist said they work with students. Okay, so thank you for sharing that information with us. Y'all, these have been really great questions, and I hope that as you continue to have questions, that's why we're all here on the screen, so that if you see us on the streets, you can be like, hey, Leslie, I know you, and you can ask those questions, or you can email us, or you can call. And John Scott is a definite resource. If he doesn't have the answer, he'll find the answer for you. Megan is going to be learning and doing and wonderful things, and so she will very quickly become a resource for everyone. And I want to thank y'all for your time. Have a great afternoon. And again, as questions are coming up, please reach out to us. Don't just sit back and think things will take care of themselves. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.